Hey, what is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be going over the biggest myth about controller Fortnite. Whenever people in the Fortnite community complain about controller players, there's typically three different things that they complain about. The first thing you'll see people say is aim assist is overpowered, second is that controller players have less recoil, and third is that controller players have less bloom. Now, the whole aim assist thing is all subjective, so there's really no need to talk about that in this video, but the other two complaints about recoil and bloom are a lot more interesting in my opinion. This may surprise a lot of controller players that are relatively new to this channel, but believe it or not, controller Fortnite actually does have less recoil than mouse and keyboard Fortnite. This is something that I showed in a video maybe 6 or 7 months ago, and I even checked again to make sure everything is still the same. And since a lot of you guys probably haven't seen that random video from about half a year ago, I'll just show you guys an updated clip of controller having less recoil. What I'm gonna do is fire a full clip of a weapon on controller, and you'll see how high the crosshair ends up going due to the recoil. Then I'll plug in a mouse and do the same exact thing. So yeah, as you saw in that clip, it's pretty cut and dry that controller actually does have less recoil. And just as a quick side note here, a somewhat common misconception regarding this is that a lot of people think that controller having less recoil is a relatively new thing. Around 3 months ago, when the new aim assist and settings were added into Fortnite, a clip very similar to what I just showed you guys basically went viral. And that led to a lot of people believing that controller got something like a recoil nerf with the new settings. But that definitely isn't true. It's been the same way for as long as I can remember, and very likely since the game was first released. There's actually even proof of and more information about this in the detailed statistics that Fortnite gives for each weapon. If you go onto Fortnite Tracker and click on any regular fully auto weapon, when you scroll down to the recoil section of the statistics, you'll see something called vertical gamepad recoil multiplier with a value under it of 0.5. That right there indicates that when you're playing Fortnite on a gamepad, which basically means any type of controller, your vertical recoil for these weapons is going to be half of what it would be if you were using a mouse, and I think the clip I showed earlier really backs that up. But if you also looked at horizontal gamepad recoil multiplier, the value for that is 1.0, so your left and right recoil is going to be the same no matter which platform you actually play on. So because of all that, mouse and keyboard players complaining about controller having less recoil isn't just some crazy theory, it's actually a proven fact. However, what I want the main focus of the rest of this video to be about is the other criticism of controller Fortnite, the theory that along with it having less recoil, it also has less bloom. To be fair to the mouse and keyboard players out there, I can totally understand where this theory comes from. There are plenty of really popular clips out there of controller players hitting something like 4 to 5 SMG or AR headshots in a row, and because bloom usually is so detrimental in Fortnite, it makes it seem like a lot of those clips simply shouldn't be possible with regular bloom. So all it really takes is 1 or 2 well-known players to theorize that controller has less bloom, and over time, more and more people have started to believe it. And unfortunately, unlike with recoil, the way bloom works in Fortnite makes it pretty difficult to actually test. The simple explanation of bloom is that whenever you fire a bullet, it has a random chance to land anywhere within the crosshair space of whatever weapon you're firing. But it's actually a little more complicated than that. I don't fully 100% understand it myself, and I don't want to go super in depth to prevent myself from saying something stupid, but apparently you can't test bloom by just fully auto-firing a weapon because recoil will skew the results of the test. But a few days ago, a user on Reddit named ReeseHub did a really interesting test comparing bloom on controller versus bloom on keyboard and mouse. And here's the setup for the test in Reese's own words. I set up a sentry that was 7 tiles away from myself and equipped myself with a gold skull. I then shot single shots from the hip without using ADS and waited until the bloom and recoil had reset before I fired the next shot. This was to ensure that there was no recoil affecting each shot. On keyboard and mouse, I bound the pound key to a secondary fire button so that I didn't accidentally move the mouse while clicking. On controller, I aimed at the same spot and then turned my right stick dead zone as high as it would go to ensure that I didn't nudge the stick or have any drift. The sentry had 500 total HP, and I counted how many bullets it would take to eliminate the sentry for each kill. I did a total of 50 kills on each input, which was roughly 1,000 single shots fired, and then I compared the average amount of bullets fired for a kill. In theory, if controller does have less bloom, then the results would show a lower amount of bullets per kill on average than on keyboard and mouse. So what ReeseHub set up here is a really effective experiment, and it should give us a pretty good indication if there actually is less bloom on controller. So I was initially going to show you guys the short little clips he posted of him doing one example test on both controller and mouse, but now that I think about it, the explanation he gave that described the test is just as good as seeing it pretty much. So I don't think there's really a need to show you guys a 20-second video of him shooting one shot at a time at a sentry until it dies. Therefore, we can hop right into the results, which are definitely the most important part. On keyboard and mouse, it took a total of 909 bullets to kill the 50 sentries, which results in an average of 18.18 bullets per kill. He also stated that the max number of bullets it took to kill one of the 50 sentries was 35, and the minimum was 12. On controller, it took 938 bullets to kill the sentries, which comes out to an average of 18.76 per kill, so actually higher than what it was on keyboard and mouse. However, interestingly enough, the minimum and maximum values were both lower, with 31 being the max and 8 being the min. So what exactly can we take away from those results? At least in my opinion, even though the amount of bullets per kill were slightly lower on average on mouse compared to controller, I don't think the difference was big enough to where it's actually significant. Therefore, I think it means that in all likelihood, the amount of bloom on both platforms are actually equal. So it probably isn't a good idea to run around saying mouse has less recoil than controller or vice versa. But I also think it's interesting that the max and min values were both a lot lower on controller, even though the average was higher. And I think Reese's theory about this was really interesting. He wrote, both the maximum and minimum number of bullets to kill were lower on controller by a significant amount, however, the average was still higher. This would suggest that controller bloom is slightly more volatile than KBM, having times where there's very little bloom and others where your bullets don't hit much at all. Now again, all that was is a theory, so don't go running around spreading it like it's 100% confirmed, but it could serve as an interesting explanation for a lot of those crazy clips where it looks like controller players have no bloom at all. But I personally think the more likely explanation is that it's the lower recoil that makes the bloom on controller look easier to control. If you're constantly able to keep your crosshair right in the middle of your enemy's body, which should be a lot easier to do with less recoil, then you're gonna have a higher chance of hitting your shots even with bloom. It sounds kinda simple when you think about it like that, but I don't think a lot of people even consider that when talking about bloom. But since Fortnite keeps the more detailed aspects of bloom in the dark pretty much, I guess we'll never know with 100% certainty. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down in the comment section below. What do you guys think about the whole controller has less bloom than keyboard and mouse theory? Do you think the testing showcased in this video kind of disproved that, or is it still something that you believe in? Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.